Welcome to Video Game Soundtrack Review. My name is Terence.
I'm Mike.
Now we're doing something a little different. As we promised before initially, we were going to focus on vinyl that expanded beyond video game soundtracks.
Absolutely.
And I could not think of a better way than to introduce this particular soundtrack. Mike, take it away.
Oh, this is not only is the soundtrack a masterpiece, as we've described it before, the film is a masterpiece. The influences are continuous even to this day. The way it's shaped our lives, to use that cliche. We are talking about the brilliant anime film, technically, Akira.
So, on our other brother channel, Chargeback Forward, we will be talking more about the influences of Akira that it's had on media in general, as well as the movie. But for here, we need a whole video just to discuss the brilliance of this soundtrack, which we have just listened to on vinyl. And we did something additionally fun, and we'll get into that later. We actually did a bit of comparison between what they consider the audiophile black 180 gram version and a clear blood splatter, which you'll see clearer later, 150 gram version. So we wanted to see which one was better, and that was part of our listening experience. But Mike, let's talk about sitting down with this. So usually, folks, when we do these filming sessions, we film up to we'll listen to 4 different albums a day, which generates 8 different videos for a video game soundtrack review, 4 for Chargeback 4. Today we did things a little differently. Now, this is a double album, and because of that, and because it's our first movie soundtrack, we wanted to spend a little more time because we needed to absorb it and make sure we were prepared. And boy, I'm really happy we did this, because right now I do not want to listen to anything else, because I still have the soundtrack like just pattering through my head.
Absolutely. It's a lot to intake as well. It's a very complex and heavy soundtrack is almost the word to use. Like, there's a lot to absorb, similar to the film itself, where the cliche is this takes multiple viewings or this takes multiple listens, and that's kind of what this soundtrack is, because there's just so much going on with the variety of sounds. It's part like synth, it's part kabuki, it's part theater, monk chanting.
So the dude that did this, there's a bit of a backstory when it comes to this soundtrack. So I guess we need to talk a little bit about the movie. Yeah. So Akira was a comic book that I believe was released initially. So this was a continuing series, of course, and it was released, I believe, I want to say 83 or 84. Because this was a comic book that lasted 10 years, and Akira, the movie, came out pretty much right in the middle of the comic book run, which is really interesting. Again, we'll speak more of the comic book on Chargeback Forward, but obviously this was, and reading the comic in hindsight, it's very easy to see where they could draw the influence. So they got the idea, let's make the movie. So they ended up getting a gentleman, and this to compose the soundtrack. And this gentleman used a pseudonym, because he was actually a professor. I'm gonna kill it right here, and so it's on our digital download card, right? So it's Dr. Shoji Yamashiro, and I don't believe that's the name he originally went when he composed this. He's a neuro. I'm trying to think of the correct term. Basically, he was a doctor, and his specialty was the study of sound frequencies on the human brain and how the human brain interpreted it. So, wow, when a person with this pedigree, who also has an ear for music, decides to compose a soundtrack, and then in the way it is recorded, absolutely breathtaking. It takes you to a journey. Mike, when we were watching, because the music is so ingrained in us
that we're envisioning parts of the film from the soundtrack. Like, even when we're listening to it, we're like, oh yeah, this is the scene where this happens, this is the scene where this happens. And we just knew it off by heart.
Now think of that. Now that's a sign, obviously, of a great soundtrack. Though that it's memorable. One, it's, you can hum the tunes, you enjoy listening to it. But then that next step. Now, Mike, you say you haven't watched Akira in about 6-7 years?
Yeah, I think when the second time the Blu-ray release came around was the last time I watched it, and that was probably 5-6 years ago.
Now, I share your experience. I showed Jess it early on, so it's going to be the same time frame, 5-6 years ago or so. And the reason we're able to talk about it and to talk about the movie, and we will be talking about the movie aspect more in Chargeback Forward, but the reason why we can do a video like this and do the other one is the fact that Mike and I combined have probably seen Akira since it was kind of brought to our shores in 1991. It is an 88 release in Japan. Since the first time we saw it in 91, I think collectively, 80 times?
Easily. Yep.
Easy. And so going from 1991 all the way up, so we haven't seen it since the early 2010s, 2012, 2013, something like that. But even in that time, the various releases, for me it was VHS bootleg, then it was the official Streamline release on VHS, then the Pioneer DVD release. Then before that, and again, we'll talk about the Laserdisc version, because well, there's a lot to talk about. Anyways, the fact of the matter is this is a soundtrack that fits perfectly with its subject material, and it is so listenable.
It really is, and it's something that's hard to do. Like, just putting off the film just for a second. So the film is essentially cyberpunk, Neo Tokyo, but the soundtrack mixes what you would figure futuristic cyberpunk would sound like think like Blade Runner soundtrack, mixed with traditional Japanese instruments, chanting, and you take this really old school, like we're talking like thousands of years old school style of music, and combine it with at the time, like the new style, and it's seamless, and it works so well. Like, you can listen to monks chanting, and we're sitting there thinking, this is so intense. Like, your body's almost tensing up listening to it.
And another thing that I love about it is so, I'm not sure if we've really spoken about this yet, but something that we really find important with vinyl exclusively as a format is it gives you pause. Mm-hmm. Now, on a normal, so if you get a soundtrack or an album or whatever, and it's on one LP, you basically have an intermission, a halftime where the first 4 or 5 tracks ends and it's time to flip the disc. So of course, take the needle off, stop the turntable, flip, dust clean the stylus, put it back and go. So it's a process. What I love about double LPs is you have that, but then there's a sense of a greater intermission between disc 1 and disc 2, almost like seeing a movie in the theater that had a proper intermission.
That's right, yeah.
Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet comes to mind, like full intermission. So there was so much time to reflect listening to this, and we started to realize together that each side represented something, like a different aspect of the movie, and it was. And it's even said there, well, we're going to show these in a second. Actually, bring one of these out right here. So here are the inner sleeves for the Akira. They're, obviously beautiful. And on the other side, on that one, I would encourage everyone that buys this to read this, or even if you can't get your hands on this vinyl, this is a fantastic little bit of information to read. And then over on here, so I'm not even sure. This is the great part. I am so frazzled by how beautiful the soundtrack was. I'm like, what's even going on? Here it is. So at the bottom of the credits here, it says this DSD 11.2 megahertz cutting master used for the Symphonic Suite Akira 2016, the Hypersonic High Resolution Edition released digitally in Japan. So they didn't even get a physical release for that initially there. Was used for this album. The sequence of music was changed from its original listing for optimal play on the vinyl format. So that means 2 things, taking a little more time in terms of structuring a listening experience, but also being able to create this soundscape, if you will, and do it in a way where you're using as much of the wax as possible, keeping it to 2 LPs versus 3, like you've seen in the past. Side A is basically we'll do side A, B, C, D. So side A, it's very energetic. It's the opening. It's the biker gang.
Like chase scene and everything, yeah. The city with the spotlights going back and forth, and very, very like cyberpunk Japanese anime, TurboGrafx 16 video game kind of look to it, yeah.
Like high energy. Things are happening, and you can feel it. You never need to see this movie to really get that. The second track is the first major confrontation between one of the protagonists, which would be Kaneda, which is this dude right here, and one of the antagonists in the movie to a far lesser extent than the comic books, who the Killer Clown, or he does have a name, but You know, it's been that much longer since I've read the comics, and the name escapes me. But it's that first epic, basically game of chicken on motorcycle that Kaneda and the clown leader are playing, and just that music, and it feels tense, and there's suspense to it.
And the soundtrack's like the heavy breathing. Yeah.
Oh, boy. Oh, you know, it's and
really
I know
works. It really works.
I sound like an idiot doing it right now because obviously I'm not trained how to do that. I'm not standing. Whatever. But
Yeah.
it's so visceral. It's so kinetic. It is. So anyway, side A is just basically when you see any Akira art, the cityscape or the motorcycle.
Yeah.
The motorcycle, as we bring this one back in, and Kaneda walking up to it like this. This is probably between this and Terminator 2. This is why I rode motorcycles. Right. So then side B is a much different feeling, and as I was describing to you, Mike, it felt almost like I wouldn't go so far as to call it a nightmare sequence. It's more like an otherworldly experience on Earth. So it's not even that you're directly experiencing something, it's almost like you're literally watching something. But it's very exotic and foreign, and it's full of mystery. It's like you're literally in a land that you don't understand, that you have no experience with, and you're basically living it directly through your eyes. And so it's very, very surreal.
Yeah.
Side 3, so side C was definitely the greatest example of no theater, the chants, the percussion.
Yes, a lot of chanting on that side for sure.
And if you've never seen like no theater, NOH, you're on YouTube, check it out. It's breathtaking. It's a breathtaking art form, and to be able to incorporate the music that goes into no theater and to put it into the Akira soundtrack. It was very emotionally moving, not in a crying standpoint, but what would you say, Mike?
Like emotionally heavy. I think it's the term I'll use. Like it feels almost like there's an extra weight in the room when you're hearing it, but not like a weight that's pulling you down and is painful, but just kind of like the sense of
like a greater greater presence.
Yeah, like the greater presence is the best way to describe it. Yeah,
and again, it's how it was recorded, how it was mixed, how it was remastered, the texturing of it. I thoroughly am in awe of individuals that can mix things properly. A big problem we see in live performances now is the fact that whoever's front of house doing the audio board, for the most part, they're garbage. And I don't know what happened. I can think of the second time I saw Saga. I was literally front row, and of course that's not the best place acoustically, and it was an outdoor venue. But it just felt like basically the bass, so the bass keyboard and the bass guitar, like those channels were put to 12 out of 10, and because of that, I couldn't hear the guitarist. I could only kind of hear like the main keyboard, and if it wasn't for the very strong drummer, I'm not sure if I would have heard the piece.
Yeah.
This is expertly mixed, and coming from the movie, I expect nothing less. But side 3, really, you're right, it had that very heavy presence where it's kind of like, wow, it's bigger than just listening to an album. I know that sounds crazy, but for that one side C was like that. And then finally, side D is essentially the climax of the movie and the denouement. And for those that have seen the movie, I'm not going to say anything really to spoil it because it's a phenomenal movie beginning to end. But the images that come to mind from side D are breathtaking. And again, how Mike and I were talking about, specifically pointing out, oh yeah, this is where, for example, earlier on in probably side B.
I remember side B with the music when Tetsuo is in the hospital and he's imagining, well, we think at the time, imagining seeing things, and it's that, and it reminds me of like when you were a kid, trying to get to sleep, and your brain's kind of playing tricks on you, and you're kind of seeing in the dark, and your brain kind of manipulates, and kind of almost like you see items forming in front of you, and that's the kind of music that just kind of, it's like I said, it's almost kind of psychological. Like it really felt like that was happening.
then going from that moment, that track, going from that magic ground, and that's like, for me, that's one of my favorite moments. As you said, that when Tetsuo, there's a point where Tetsuo, who is one of the two protagonists, I think the story's more about him than Kaneda. Kaneda is action hero. Tetsuo is both protagonist and ultimate antagonist,
and
which is
just tragic to be
honest. It's tragic. It's a tragic story about this poor kid and what he goes through. So that one point where he sees, I guess it's either the bunny or the bear. I think it's the bunny, and it's crawling on his bed. And he can't sleep. He's in the hospital. He's having these crazy migraines, and then he starts hearing this music, and then these little stuffed animals start coming towards him. There's a bear. There's a bunny, and then later there's a car. A stuffed car. So whatever, the bunny or the bear, whoever crawls up onto his bed and is coming towards him, and Tetsuo, as you're saying, he just reaches out. He reaches out and he grabs it. And he looks at it. I'm telling you, Mike, when you reminded me of that, I'm like, wow, that was like the moment where it's just like you're saying, you're a kid and you think you're seeing things, and then reality comes into play. But then obviously the scene gets way crazier. and then how side B ends is that really, and considering that this is the track before a true intermission in terms of listening, because it's the end of the first album before we listen to the second one. And it's very great and uplifting, and it almost has this feeling like it's the true beginning of a journey, and just how that's conveyed and how that leaves you where you can reflect on it. I felt that to be so strong, and that's probably my favorite moment of the entire album, because you still know there's a second one coming. Because this isn't new for us. It's just the format. Like, listening to this was the first time that either of us listened to this on vinyl, right?
Exactly, yeah. Because before, obviously, it was on CD or we listened to a movie. We both were talking how we back in the '90s bought the CD soundtracks from import stores and whatnot. So but you're right. This is our first time listening to it in vinyl.
Share our dual story. Now, this is the thing. Mike and I. Okay, so here's a quick story of Mike and I. So Mike and I have been buds since 2008, right? So it's over a decade at this point. Now, Mike and I had been in the same physical space before without directly knowing. And that, of course, was play a video game symphony at what is now called, I guess it would have been at the Sony Center, or was it at Roy Thompson Hall?
I can't remember the name. That was...
Well, it was at one of our premier venues in Toronto. For listening to music. And so which was it, the Shenmue one, or was it Daytona?
Daytona, USA, yeah.
So so the guy that composed the tracks for Daytona, USA, and has that amazing voice, and he literally gives 300% in a live performance. I don't stand up and cheer for people, especially it's like, oh yeah, I don't really know who this guy is, but you fucking hear that? And you're like, yes, yes. So I believe there was a handful of people that stood up at a certain point and clapped. Mike and I were two of those people, and I even remember, because I think I was more left center of stage and you were more center or slightly right center of stage.
Slightly right, yeah.
I remember looking at you. Honestly, of course, this could be, I could be creating a story in my mind, but I remember looking over and thinking, this guy knows what it's about. This guy knows what it's about. So let's shift gears. This is fantastic. Let's talk about the first time that we brought the Akira soundtrack home, and it wasn't what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, a crazy story, because we told our stories and we're like, we did the exact same thing. So when the soundtrack came out, I had bought it, and we didn't realize there was basically two soundtracks at the time. One, the score, and then one with the score but with audio clips from the film played over it. So we had both unknowingly bought that one originally, and I remember when I bought that, I was living at home at the time, and the only CD player we had was out in the living room, and I thought, there's no way I'm listening to this around my parents. Like, forget that. I want to listen to it in privacy of my own. So I had the CD soundtrack in my hand. I bought from probably Sam Record Man or HMV. Walked down the street to one of those, questionable electronics places, and bought like a CD boombox at the same time and walked home with it. And they got home and listened to it, and I'm kind of like, I heard all the voices in Japanese and kind of like, what's going on here? But yeah, you did the exact same thing, which is crazy.
But ultimately both are fantastic. So the symphonic suite has always looked the same, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a fan of this art. Never been a fan of this art. I've always wanted, we keep on pulling it back, and I've always wanted this to be the cover. Because this says everything, you know, like the angle, the perspective, like the lines, like this.
This is now the cover they use now in all the Blu-ray releases and
Yes.
whatnot. Have this cover now, yeah. This is what they switched to now.
It's easier. Yeah. This one I really like it, but it's more stylized, and I think you appreciate this more after you've seen the movie. Like, I can't tell you how many times it took me looking at this until I saw this particular structure in the background, for example. But this looked like that, so whatever. And I don't know about you, but maybe because the other one looked better, and I was a stupid kid, I didn't really, read the back of it to really get what's going on. I picked that up, and I almost remember. Let me know if yours was like this. I swear my jewel case had a white plastic backing versus the typical like traditional black backing.
I think it did, because that was a very Japanese thing to do,
right.
to have white backing. And I remember
and the spine there as well was white.
They had the spine card. I remember it advertising they called it a picture disc, because on the cover was actually like, we get soundtracks or music CDs with just, the writing of the tracks on it. It was very common back then. This is still very, very early 90s, but this had a full-fledged,
silk screen
artwork on it, which was very, today we take it for granted seeing it on game covers or whatnot. But back then, that was still very unique, and they made a big deal out of it on the package if that happened.
I think it's pretty cool they did that, because they did it with vinyl, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in case any of our friends that are watching this, you're wondering about picture discs, if you're ever going to buy one, like, buy it because you want a picture disc.
Yeah,
like,
buy it to look at it. Don't buy it to listen to it.
I have, as I'm literally walking off stage here, off set, I'm gonna pull out a great gift that I got. So this is from Germany. So this is a German pressing of Worlds Apart by Saga, who is like literally like one of my favorite bands. And so the cover right off the bat's different than the normal release. Normal release has like an older gentleman looking at a map, and there's like smoke everywhere. This one, on the other hand, has that's the map that he's holding, and I think this kind of harkens this space scene harkens to their original trilogy. And then on the back, it's this nice kind of collage of the different guys, right? And another great thing, Mike, this passes my test, by the way, where you don't have to be like, oh, I have to flip it over to look at it. So these things look great. The problem is, you can tell, like, I have no desire to ever listen to this, because I haven't actually even cleaned it, and it's still in its original like sleeve that I bought it in, or that I was given it to. Picture discs sound terrible. They're absolutely garbage. We were gonna talk about Journey at some point, which is a phenomenal soundtrack and a phenomenal video game. I don't think I even recorded it, because they just sounded like garbage.
Yeah,
garbage.
It's on picture disc, yeah.
So whatever. But yeah, we both kind of got duped by the more theatrical
it was
edition.
It's weird. It was still kind of cool, because at the time we had only probably heard the English dub or the original English dub, and now hearing all the Japanese, it was quite jarring at first. But it's still like the soundtrack. It just came down to the how everything just flows so well with that music, the way that the action and everything is. It's like you said, with the composer knowing how the human brain works.
Exactly, and it's the sound attacks your ears in such a beautiful way. So the Blu-ray of this is one of the only Blu-rays released that has see if I can do this right, 192 hertz, 96 bits audio, audio recording, right? So that is I can't remember if that's DTS HDMA or if that's Dolby True HD, but whichever one it is, I think that is the max resolution they could put on a Blu-ray. Like, it's the highest format that like good receivers will play, and so that says a lot that Blu-ray has been around, Mike, for how many years now?
Came out officially in 2006. So that's 12 years, almost 13 years now.
Yep. And I think the special edition Blu-ray came out.
It was still fairly early. I want to say like 2009.
2010.
Yeah, right around there. Yeah.
And back in the day, Baraka, which is a beautiful, I like to call it a highbrow stoner movie. It's basically a couple of dudes travel the world and they just film beautiful shit with 70mm fucking stock, right? And so that soundtrack was 90. It was not 192. It was half of that, and it still sounded amazing. And then when we got around to listening to the Blu-ray version of Akira, when the sound becomes that uncompressed, you literally lose the speakers. You're no longer acknowledging sound is coming from the speakers. It creates such a soundscape around you that you literally feel that you're in it, and it's not oppressive. And even though
your ears don't get tired, I think is one of the terms we're using. It's kind of like if you listen to another soundtrack or another movie that is say DTS Master Audio or whatever. Like it sounds obviously awesome, but at the end of it, you're almost like your ears are almost exhausted. It's kind of a weird way of saying it.
Turn it down.
Yeah, with the Akira, it was nothing like that.
I don't think I've listened to a movie louder than Akira, and at the end of it, not be like, oh my ears. It's like, wow. Do you remember that part when the skyscraper near the beginning and all the shards of glass coming from the windows and just how that was? Yeah, needless to say, the movie we'll talk about far more in the other video. So, Mike, if you're on a desert island and you can only have one movie soundtrack on vinyl, would Akira be it?
You know what? It would be. I think it probably would be. There's like for all my favorite soundtracks, like movie scores of all time. It's like we'll talk about Blade Runner in a future video, but Blade Runner is always up there.
Oh yes, we will.
I hate to use the cliche, but I gotta say it. It's like nothing you've heard before. Like we've got soundtracks which have sweeping symphony sounds, a bit of mix with synth and symphony, or like John Carpenter film, which is all synths. We've got all those, which is awesome. But this is a soundtrack with kabuki, intense, like xylophones, and like literally 200 musicians playing at once.
That was the whole point of it at the time. They, as I drastically and as I desperately look for the card that I don't have his name. So here we go. So Shoji Yamashiro, that's what he did. I can't say your dude's name. Sorry, Shoji. As I look at the card, yeah,
we'll get an angry fax from him.
We'll get an angry fax from him. But that's what Shoji Domo did. The dude said, "Hey, I want to make a soundtrack that hasn't been done before. I want to make a soundtrack for the future."
Yeah.
And he did it, and he succeeded tremendously. So to as far as I'm concerned, that's like a masterwork. This should be that dude's magnum opus. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the vinyl. So there was a couple of different variations released. There is one here, which is the clear with some really cool blood splatter. I
really like how the dots are very deep red.
Yes, and they're very deep. It's a very great word for it. So if you want to see this beautiful thing being spun, hold on for a second, in combination to this beautiful thing being spun, which is the 180 gram quote-unquote audiophile edition of this. I guess we should talk about the differences, right? So anyways, if you wanted to check this out being spun, link in the description below. You can check out our other brother channel, VGSR2, where we spin a track from this. And since this is a clear one, I do a little bit of editing magic, so there's that. So one thing that we did as soon as we were done listening to the soundtrack is we decided that we wanted to do an A/B comparison. So we listened to the first track off of side A of the 180 as well as the 150 to figure out, is the 180 the audiophile version? Is it that much?
It's better? A very iconic track that we know like the back of our hand. So it's the best track for us to compare to because there's no track you probably haven't listened to more than that one. Exactly.
And Mike, what was our end result of that?
It's now this is playing on the exact same equipment, same volume level, same everything. For us, it was very difficult to tell the difference. I had said at the end of our listening, I said the 180 gram version sounded what I would refer to as a bit deeper, maybe a bit fuller, but very slightly, and like nothing that would make me go, oh yeah, the 150 gram sounds like crap. Nothing like that.
Yeah, it's, as you said, it felt like the 180 gram release was a very slightly larger soundscape, a bit more deep.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed a tad more like right and left separation of the audio channels, but again, not enough to be, if you've gotten the clear blood splatter version, and you're like, oh man, I want the 180, you're not missing out on much. Good to know. I was honestly, I was kind of expecting something more.
Yeah.
However, if there was a picture disc version of Akira that we put it up, there would be a problem.
Exactly.
All right, so we've literally talked like 35 minutes about the soundtrack, which is our longest video on the video game soundtrack.
You can tell how passionate we are about the soundtrack. I think the end result is listen to the soundtrack. If you have the ability to listen to vinyl, either whatever you prefer, if you want the 180 gram or you like the way the blood splatter one looks, you'll be happy either way. But I think it's very necessary.
I got both.
Yeah.
That's Mike's blood splatter.
I only got the blood splatter. But,
well, one more final story before we go. So the reason why I got the blood splatter version is because you're like, oh shit, Terence, blah blah blah. So
it was limited as well.
Yeah. So I jumped on.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not sure why, because you could only buy one.
Yeah, I remember at the time. I don't know if things are different now on their site, but at the time they would only allow. At least when I tried to order it, it was one per customer or whatever for the limited edition.
Yeah, because you tried to order me one.
Yeah.
So it's like, go on. So I went on, I ordered it. And then for shits and giggles, immediately after, I opened a private browser and I tried to do it again. Sold out. So I literally...
That's right, you probably got the last one.
I got the last one.
Yeah.
And, but then I found out there was the 180 gram one, and I'm like, well, I want the audiophile version of it. So whatever. As you can see, I have no reason to open it up. If I ever want to listen to the blood splatter, we got yours.
Yep.
And but I'm happy to have both, two versions of it, because this is probably, easy top 5 motion picture soundtracks of all time for me. And when you guys leave this to listen, you will agree with that too. I'm very sure. I am very sure you'll agree with us. Folks, it's been a fantastic time talking with my brother Mike and sharing this with you about one of our favorite soundtracks of all time, Akira. Again, you can check out us talking about the movie, its influences, and other things that are going to come up. God knows how that video is going to go. Check that out on Chargeback Forward. And to see both of these versions being spun on a nice Marantz TT15S1 turntable, BGSR2, we got that link for you as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks for all the comments and all the support we've been getting thus far. Please keep it coming. Share, bang the bell, whatever. And if you've been listening to us for this long, you can also follow us on Twitter.
Yep.
Prepare for Big Mike and Terence and Bounce. There's your links. Folks, thanks for watching, and we look forward to having another awesome discussion and sharing it with you, the YouTube friends. That was ridiculous. I'm not going to do that anymore, I promise. All right, folks. Until the next time we get to talk, enjoy the music and give this a listen. It is a high recommendation.
And see the movie. If you haven't watched the movie, watch the movie.
Yo,
forget that. Watch the movie.
Watch the movie first. Watch the movie
first.
If you can handle subtitles, I would recommend the Japanese version. Or if you want to get nostalgic, if you can find the Streamline dub version, that's also really fun. Kaneda from Ninja Turtles plays Kaneda.
Yeah, Leonardo from Ninja Turtles plays Kaneda.
What did I say?
Kaneda from... There may be a Canadian Ninja.
There may be a Kaneda from Ninja Turtles, but no. Leonardo from Ninja Turtles, that dude was Kaneda, and it was awesome. And some of the lines in it, like when you can watch a movie and one of the lines is, "What? That pea brain." You know you have a winner. All right, fans and friends, and we don't have any fans. We're just a couple of guys, friends. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.